Okay, we want to look at three different topics today. So let's start with the first one. How would you describe what slope is to a fourth grader? Your little brother or sister's a fourth grader, and they say, "What's slope?" How are you going to describe it to somebody? Well, here's what I would simply say. I would say it's the steepness. It's how steep a line is. We deal with slope on wheelchair ramps and all types of places, stairs, even football fields for water to drain off of it. The center of the field is a little touch higher, not a lot, but enough to where the water basically flows off the center of the field, off to the sidelines. So I would say steepness is the best way to describe slope. Now, let's look at this. We have the points -1, 1 and 4, 3. What is the slope here? Well, we know we've been taught it's rise over run. So you, in this case, rose 2 and you ran over 5. So the slope here is 2 over 5. It's easy when we see it. Now, it is a positive slope because it's going up to the right. When we see pictures, it's easy. But if they give us points, it's a little harder. Now, I do have this saying. Let's look at this. Slope, rise with the y's and run to the exit, playing off of those words. So if there's a fire, all of a sudden, what do? We rise with the wise people. The idiots stay back and get burned. And we run to the exit. Okay, so rise with the wise, run to the exit. Notice you have rise over run, and then y's over x's. Because again, rising, that's the change in your y values. That's going up. And then running is the changing in your x values because x's are left to right. So slope is rise over run, or the formula that we mostly use, the change in your y's over the change in your x's. To keep it straight of y's over x's, if you can't see it in your mind that rise is up, which is the change in your y values, just remember, rise with the y's and run to the exit. So let's look at a quick example. So I want to know the slope between here. So I'm like, hey, the slope, rise with the y's, run to the exit. The little triangle is delta, and it means the change. Usually you've probably seen it in science with the change in temperature, change in T, delta T. So here's what I'm going to do. Now we can do y sub 1 minus y sub 2 over x sub 1 minus x sub 2. I'm not worried about that. What I'm worried about is, as long as if you start with this y, let's say, and you subtract that 4, you have to make sure you start with that 5. You can't all of a sudden start with a 3. So if I'm subtracting 10 minus 4, I have to make sure I do the 5 minus the 3. I got to keep it in order. Otherwise, you're going to have a negative slope or a positive slope. You're going to have the reverse of what you should. The numbers would be the same. We'll have 6 over 2 here, which gives us 3. If I'd flipped the 3 and 5, you would have had 6 over -2, which would have made it -3. You'd be going the wrong direction. So that's slope. We've done that before. Should not be difficult. Simply subtract your y's, divided by subtract your x's. Just make sure you subtract them in the correct order. All right, what about distance between points? How far apart from this town to that town? Well, if you remember, we could do a little trick here. We said this was 2 and this is a distance across a 5. We can see that easily, and it comes at a perfect right angle. Do you remember the old Pythagorean theorem? The old Pythagorean theorem would say the one leg squared plus the other leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So here, 4 and 25 is equal to c squared. 29 is c squared, and then you got to come in here and take the square root. So basically, not c squared, c is approximately square root of 29. Well, I'm going to go with, I'm guessing, 5.2, because 5 times 5, probably 5 point, closer to 5. That's going to be more than that, Cecil. It's probably going to get to about 5.4, might even get to 5.5. I don't know. So that is how we do the distance. And it's great if we have a picture. Well, what we do is we take this Pythagorean theorem. How did we get 2? It was simply the difference between, in this case, the 2, I sort of did it backwards, is the distance between your heights, 1 and 3. And then how did we get that 5? Well, that was the distance from -1 over here to 4. So the legs of that right triangle for the Pythagorean theorem are simply the difference of your y values and the difference of your x values. that allows us to write the formula like this. The distance is equal to the change in your x values squared plus the change in your y values squared, and then you got to take the square root. Because notice back here what we did is we found the difference of our y's, which was 2, and then we squared it. Found the difference of our x's, and then squared it. Add them together, and the final thing is we took the square root. That's why you have the square root in there. So let's look. Let's say we need the distance between these points. Well, I'm simply going to subtract my x's, 5 and 2. Well, the difference between 5 and 2 is 3, and I'm going to square it. Doesn't matter if you do it backwards because 2 minus 5 is negative 3, and once you square negative 3, it's going to be positive 9 no matter what. So here, we're actually don't even have to worry about negative values or anything. 14 and 10 is 4. If you did it backwards, negative 4, but what's negative 4 squared going to give you? Positive 16 either way. So no matter what, we're going to get a positive 9 and a positive 16, even if those values, if they had been negative, just make sure you put a parentheses around them, remember. You're going to get the 9 and the 16. So we get the square root of 25, which in this case is 5. Distance between these points is 5. Now we need to talk about the midpoint, which is simply the middle point. Where is the middle line, the distance in the dead center? Well, it's pretty easy. If you just look, here's 1, here's a height of 3. What's in the middle? 2. So I know it's going to be sort of right there. And notice that that's perfect also for the x values. 1 and 4 would be 2.5 away, which would be right here would be the dead center, and there it hits. So to find the middle, all we have to do is find the middle of our x's and the middle of our y's. The same way we always find the average of 2 test scores. You add them together and divide by 2. So basically our midpoint is, somebody was up late and typed it wrong. You got to add your x's together, divide by 2, add your y's together, and divide by 2. So let's find a midpoint of 4, 9, and 14, 31. We don't have a picture, so it's not as easy to find, but yeah, it is. Add your x's together, 4 plus 14, and then divide them by 2. So you're finding the middle of your x's. Then add your y's together, 9 and 31, and divide by 2. So I have 18 divided by 2. That'll give me the middle of the x's. 40 divided by 2, that'll give me the middle of the y's, and it gives me the midpoint of the entire thing. And there you have how to find the midpoint.